What is up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. And today we're going to be getting into my top 10 Seahawks coaching candidates to replace Pete Carroll. So let's get into this. By the way, very sad that Pete Carroll's gone, but it is exciting that we get to search for a new coach. Comment down below your top 10 before we get into this, but let's get right into it now. Starting out here with number 10, it's going to be Frank Smith. And Frank Smith is the Miami Dolphins offensive coordinator right now. Don't know much other about his background than that, but he is a good offensive coordinator, is a good offensive mind. He was obviously Mike McDaniel was a big part of the Dolphins offense. But you can't take that all away from Frank Smith. He is a good mind as well. He was developing behind Mike McDaniel, so that does come from the Kyle Shanahan type system. Good offensive coordinator there. Right now, he is set. Let's see. Wait, is he? Right now, he has completed a interview with the Seattle Seahawks, so he is set to. The Seahawks know what he's made of, so we'll see what happens with him. I do believe in him, but he is number 10, so a little bit lower. But number 9 is going to be Brian Flores, the Vikings defensive coordinator. And Brian Flores has an interesting background. He obviously was a coach of the Miami Dolphins for 3 seasons, led that defense that had not a lot of talent to be a very solid defense for the Miami Dolphins. Just a mediocre team, and Brian Flores led that team to success. Almost got them to some playoff appearances in their years. Then he comes into Minnesota. That defense, as we know from their previous season, was absolutely atrocious. He comes in there to Minnesota and fixes up this defense. That pass rush was very good down there in Minnesota. Their stunts, their zone coverages were also really good. So Brian Flores is a great defensive mind, and the Seahawks could very much use that with the underperforming defense this season. So keep an eye out for Brian Flores. Right now, he has not had an interview for the Seahawks. We haven't even heard if the Seahawks were interested in him. But, if something comes up, I think he is a good coaching candidate, and I think Seattle should at least give him a chance with an interview. Okay, number 8 is going to be Elijah Avero, and Elijah Avero also has a interesting background. He was the Broncos defensive coordinator for a bit there. Was that part of that Broncos defense that we saw in 2022? That defense was one of the best in the league, even though that team wasn't great. And we see the Broncos defense this season very much struggle to start out the year. I can safely say Elijah Vera was a huge part in getting that defense ready. And then he comes to the Carolina Panthers, very similar situation to the Denver Broncos that he was in last season, where the Panthers defense just, has some talent, but Elijah Vera really got that defense to buy in. It was a good defense, one of the bright spots of the whole team, and then the Panthers offense was just atrocious that it just didn't matter. So Elijah Vera, also a great defensive mind. Right now, his status with the Seahawks, he has completed an interview similar to Frank Smith. He completed that on Wednesday. So interesting there. Elijah Vera coming in at number 8. All right, moving on. Number 7 is going to be Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn also has similar situation to Brian Flores, but Dan Quinn has some ties with the Seahawks. If you didn't know, Dan Quinn was the Seahawks defensive coordinator back when they won the Super Bowl. He was a big part in, that Pete Carroll defense, leading that team. Big part in shaping that defense, how it was with the Legion of Boom. You look at him, he goes to Atlanta. It wasn't the best time there, but he does lead that team to the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, they lose that Super Bowl. But still, he was a good coach for that for a few times there. He had some mistakes. The team wasn't doing the best. He did eventually get fired, but I don't think that was on Dan Quinn. I think it was on the team in general. It wasn't the best roster around him down there in Atlanta. But if you look at Dan Quinn's portfolio in Dallas, This Dallas Cowboys defense has really taken steps since he's gotten there. It's been a really good defense, one of the best in the leagues. Now, the interesting thing about Dan Quinn is a lot of people aren't turning on him after the performance last week against Green Bay. That defense, whoops, did not mean to go. So you get spoiled number 6, but that defense really much struggled against Green Bay. It was one game though. Dan Quinn, he's led a great defense. It does probably make me a little bit more hesitant on Dan Quinn. That's why he is coming at number 7. There's a lot of good candidates, so I do think he comes in there. It's also the nervousness of just being the same thing as a Pete Carroll-led defense where we saw for so many years them struggle. I think that's also why Dan Quinn's they're a little bit hesitant on him. He's still a good mind. He's still a good defensive coordinator. I think he's getting too much hate right now. I think he's a good candidate. I would be happy if he came to Seattle. But yeah, his status with Seattle, he has completed an interview to this point. So yeah, the Seahawks have him in line. So all 3 of these have completed interviews so far. Okay, but moving on, you saw earlier, but here we have the Bobby Slowick, the Houston Texans offensive coordinator. So we get an offensive mind now. The past 3 were defensive minds. And yeah, Bobby Slowick, really good offensive mind for the Texans. If you did not know, Bobby Slowick was part of the Kyle Shanahan team the previous season, not this year, but the other year. He worked a lot with Kyle Shanahan. So as we know, Kyle Shanahan's a great mind down there in Houston. If you look at that Texans team, what he's done, that Texans team was really bad, especially on the offense in the previous year. Completely turned it around, completely developed a really good quarterback now with C.J. Stroud. And yeah, DeMeco Ryans is a defensive mind. So we can really safely say that was a lot to do with Bobby Slowick, that the Texans offense took so many leaps this season. So, and obviously they did get better on offense. But Bobby Slowick, man, he really did a good job with that Texans offense. I really like him as a candidate. I think he would do a great job. I believe he's had a request for interview. I don't know when that's going to happen, though. We'll see what happens. But yeah, Bobby Slowick comes in at number 6. Number 5 is going to be Mike McDonald, the Baltimore Ravens defensive coordinator. And Mike McDonald's also been a great piece in that Ravens team. You look at him, he's led. I know this Ravens defense is loaded with talent, but he has been the big schemer for this defense. This defense has been one of the best in the league. You got to give credit to him where credit's due. He's also a young offense or defensive coordinator here, so he's a young mind that can come into Seattle. We can get that kind of young piece in the building. Really like him. Could be a good future piece for the Seahawks. Obviously the main concern with him is that it wasn't really all him. It was mainly just because of that defense was so good. That's why I'm a little bit more hesitant on him, but I think he would be a great piece for the Seahawks as a potential coach. He is not on the request for interviews. I think that they need to wait out on. I think they missed their opportunity to do that. I think they need to wait till the Ravens are eliminated or have won the Super Bowl or whatever to interview him. But that's where Mike McDonald comes in there at number 5. Number 4 is going to be Raheem Morris, the defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams. And yeah, Raheem Morris, very similar to Mike McDonald, is a young mind, good out of the what's his face? Why is the Rams coach slipping my mind? What in the world? Now I gotta search it up. I know it. Sean McVay. Sorry, guys. I don't know why I forgot that. But he's out of the Sean McVay team. That defense, he's obviously a different piece. Sean McVay's an offensive coach. He's a defensive coach. But, Yeah, if you look at Raheem Morris here, he is a good mind from the Rams. That Rams defense was is absolutely mid, talent wise, and he's led that defense to be really good. They obviously have Aaron Donald, but other than that, there was a lot of young pieces coming in there, and Raheem Morris developed a lot of them to be some good pieces that the Rams had. And you know, as a Seahawks fan, I don't like the Rams, but I got to give him credit. He led a defense with not many talent to be a solid defense and a playoff caliber defense as we saw there. So Raheem Morris, and they also played well in that second half, was really struggling that first half but against the Lions, but really adjusted in that second half and played a good game. In that second half, that was not the reason why the Rams lost, was because of Raheem Morris. I think he did a good job. So, I like Raheem Morris a lot. I think he's a good candidate. I have seen some hesitancy on him, but he's also a good mind, young coach. I like him quite a bit. Moving on, though, to number 3, we do have Mike Vrabel, the former Titans coach, and unjustly got fired from the Tennessee Titans. It does open up a good coach into the market, though. I really believe in Mike Vrabel. I think we see his first few seasons. He leads this team to an NFC or AFC championship game as a 6th seed in the playoffs. He leads his team to be a number 1 seed where they just barely lose to the Cincinnati Bengals. And at that point, they trade away A.J. Brown. Their team isn't as talented. They have a veteran QB like Ryan Tannehill in the building who isn't the best out there. So yeah, if you look at a coach like Mike Vrabel, I really do believe in him. I think he's a good coach. I think he's a player's guy, kind of similar to Pete Carroll. I think he can fix this defense as well. And this offense, I think he knows how to win in this league. Would be a good kind of Pete Carroll replacement type for the Seattle Seahawks. I think that Mike Vrabel got really, really kind of robbed of the Titans position. He did an excellent job there for them. So Mike Vrabel comes in at number 3 for the Tennessee Titans. And then number 2, and I know this is kind of fantasy land, but number 2 is going to be, also forgot to say, for the previous 2, let's actually do that before we get into Jim Harbaugh. For the previous 2, I don't think I mentioned this, but Raheem Morris has an interview. He actually had it yesterday, so I assume that's done. Completed interview right there. And then we look at Mike Vrabel. He hasn't had a request for an interview, but it's apparently reported interest for him to have an interview, so we'll see what happens with that. But anyway, done with that. Moving on to number 2, and like I said, this is kind of fantasy land here for Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh, if you haven't heard, his kind of beef with Pete Carroll going back. USC and Stanford days, they had beef going back to the days where he was the Niners coach, and obviously Pete Carroll as the Seahawks coach. They had some good rivalries there. And then he obviously goes to Michigan. But, if we're setting that beef aside, Jim Harbaugh's one of the best, if not the best candidate here. He has a lot on his resume, man. Obviously he was a great coach down there in Stanford for his first time. Then he goes to San Francisco. He nearly wins them a Super Bowl against his brother, John Harbaugh. Great job there. You look at him, he goes to also goes to an NFC championship with that San Francisco team. It was a short stint there in the Niners, but he did a great job. Then he goes to Michigan, takes that team to the playoffs. They do lose last year, but still a good year. And then wins them a championship this year. Really builds up that Michigan program. So, again, the beef is there. I think it's probably not going to happen. But if we're putting that aside, Jim Harbaugh, man, he's a great candidate. I think he would rally around this team. He would get this team fixed, especially this defense, man. This defense needs a wake-up call in Seattle, and I think he could. This defense is young and talented, and I think Jim Harbaugh could fix that defense. And obviously, we know how talented the Seahawks offense can be if they can get that, if he can tune into that, man. Jim Harbaugh with the Seahawks. I think that team is a contender with him in this next season. All right, number one here is going to be Ben Johnson, though, the Detroit Lions offensive coordinator. And there's just a lot that lines up with Ben Johnson to be my number one candidate here. Obviously Dan Campbell's been one of the best coaches. He's really fixed up this Detroit Lions team who was stuck in poverty for the past like 20 seasons. And then you look at Ben Johnson here, you know, sorry, but if you look at Ben Johnson here, this is a coach that is really solid. Offensive mind. He led Jared Goff in this Lions offense the past 2 seasons. He's done an excellent job with that. Really good mind, scheming up things on the run game and on the passing game. Could do excellent wonders, I think, for Geno Smith and the Seahawks offense. On top of that, he's a young mind. It's a different coach than a coach like Pete Carroll. We can get an offensive mind in the building. It just all lines up for me with Ben Johnson. I really like him as a candidate. I think he's a great coach. But yeah, anyway, guys, those are my top 10 coaches. Comment down below your thoughts and who you think should be the Seahawks' upcoming coach. Also, yeah, I almost forgot again, but Ben Johnson, to see their status, has an interview today with Seattle. Jim Harbaugh has not even had anything here yet. Not even reported for interest, which is unfortunate. I don't think it's going to happen. But if I was the GM for the Seahawks, I would at least give him an interview. But anyway, guys, thank you all for watching this video today. Hopefully you all enjoyed the content. Comment down below your thoughts. Anyway, guys, peace out.